Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Nick Pash Podcast. Today, I wanted to talk about American politics and why we need to take the tragedy of American politics in jest. And before I go on, I don't have a side. I've never had a side. I've never had a side since the first election that I watched or was aware of, which was 2016. And I was 14 at the time, so I couldn't even vote. And I was more just watching from the sidelines and found it quite entertaining. I think 2016 represents a paradigm shift in American politics. It definitely seems like it was a far less dignified election than 2012. I think there's a lot of reasons for why that might be. I think the main driver being, however, is social media and the power that social media has. Before 2016, there was no real social media. It didn't play a major role in the 2012 election. It was still mostly, if not all, driven by the mainstream media. That was not the case in the 2016 election. 2016 election was kind of the first memeable election. You know, if you are around my age or older, then you're probably aware of things like Hillary Clinton and Pokemon Go to the polls and you'd be in jail if I were the president and these sorts of things. And there was just a loss of decorum, which has only gotten worse, by the way. 2016 was way better, way more dignified election than either 2020 and certainly a more dignified election than 2024. But it still represented a departure from the dignity and the seriousness of the coveted role of the president, almost larger than life figure that is considered by many the most powerful person on earth is the president of the United States. And I think we just have to appreciate how entertaining it is and not get too hung up on it emotionally. So I don't know if I would have voted in the 2016 election if I was old enough, but I do know how I voted in 2020 and 2024. And in 2020, I voted third party as a protest of the two-party system. I couldn't see myself voting for either of those candidates. And then in 2024, I didn't vote at all because once again, I just can't imagine voting for either of the candidates. It didn't matter to me who won. I was not confident in either. I wasn't excited about either. And I think they were both so bad that it wasn't even worth figuring out which one was, as many people say, the lesser of two evils. And I think we're seeing that play out now. Nothing has really gotten better since the election. I don't think anything would have been better if things went differently in the 2024 election. In fact, they could very well even be worse. And so whether you voted or not, I don't think you were doing anything worth your time. These people, they do not serve the people. It is incredibly obvious. Things are only getting more expensive. America seems like a country that's just pillaged by anyone and everyone for what they can pillage it for. You know, we're supposed to be such a rich country, and frankly, we are, but the quality of life for the average American is just getting worse and worse. And that should not be the case. As we get more productive and as we get better infrastructure, things should only ever get better. And so it needs to be studied why things are only getting worse. And a big reason why things are only getting worse, it all starts at the top with the politicians who are selling us out every which way they can, taking bribes, and it's really just tragic. I have this sort of image in my mind of presidents that used to care about the country. And I don't know exactly when you could say this blatantly was no longer the case, but I feel like well into the 20th century, so, you know, we're talking Kennedy, Nixon, maybe some of the people from the 70s, maybe even into the 80s. You could maybe even say Bill Clinton might have cared about the American people, unlike the politicians of today, which seem to have no regard whatsoever for the quality of life of Americans. And I just cannot believe we've gotten to this point. And it seems like everyone just has a sort of defeatist attitude towards it. Like, there's nothing we can do. It's a totally corrupted government. It does not serve the people. It does anything but serve the people. They try to pretend like they serve the people But in my opinion, from my perspective, their efforts at appealing to the masses or the ordinary people like me and likely like you as well, they're just pathetic. They're totally unconvincing. I don't believe anyone in the government. There might be a handful of people, politicians in the government, that I can point to and say, okay, this person actually has principles. This person actually cares about his constituency. The rest of them seem like they're just doing the bare minimum to get elected and saying the things that they think will get them votes. It's like it's very strange how there's no real soul behind American politics. There's no authenticity. There's no sincerity. It's all theater. It's all BS. None of them actually care. None of them demonstrate or convey that they care. They put on this show to pretend like they care just to sway as many people as they need to get elected, but they don't actually address anything. They just pretend like they address things. They just pretend to pander. They don't actually talk about anything in a substantive way, like what things cost, what we're actually going to do, what problems actually are. And I guess from a politician's angle, that makes some sense because you want to appear to the constituency and the voters and the citizens as though you don't cause problems, nothing has gone wrong because of you, et cetera, et cetera. So you are put in this position to where you have to be manipulative, you have to be dishonest, because if you were actually honest, and I don't know this for sure, but I think Nixon, back when Nixon got impeached, he might have resigned or something like that because he had dignity. He was caught up in a scandal, and so he exited because he had respect for the office and cared about the job. The people today would never, ever do that. They would deny any wrongdoing. They'd pretend like they've done nothing wrong. They'd pretend like they're not responsible for anything going wrong. They pretend like there's no problems and if there are problems, they just blame the other side. And it's just totally unproductive and immature and childish. And we're all suffering as a result of this. So Nixon did not resign out of dignity per se. He might have claimed that, but still the fact that he did resign because he was going to be removed still demonstrates that things have changed drastically and illustrates the point that there's no dignity on either side, or there's much less dignity today than there was back then. Because in order for a president to be removed by impeachment, you need 2/3 of the Senate. And the reason why this hasn't happened for Trump, for the most part, is because the political parties are far more tribal today, which illustrates perfectly that they are less principled. It's all about loyalty. It's all about, we do not care about our wrongdoing. We are going to stick together no matter what, and we are against the other side no matter what. In the time of Nixon, which this was the 1970s, he resigned in 1974, his own party went against him. This is unfathomable today. It makes the news if like one or two people in a party go against their party, and that is not good. That is not healthy. These people do not have principles, and that is exactly why we live in a totally corrupted system, and it's totally not obvious what to do about that. And this is why I think we need to take all of it in jest. We need to appreciate how ridiculous it has all become. You cannot get hung up on the fact that they are all awful and that they are all selling us out. Our quality of life is going down, and we should care about that, but you should only care about it in as much as you can perhaps do something about it, or you should understand it in terms of yourself so you can navigate it as effectively as possible. As far as voting goes, it seems like voting is a complete waste of time. Maybe you could look at local offices, I don't know. But in terms of these bigger positions, it seems like there's no real change. There's not going to be a restoration of these offices and positions to where they're actually serving the American people anytime soon. And frankly, with the debt being $40 trillion or whatever it is, it really does seem like we're headed off a cliff right now. I don't know where we're going to end up, but I know the more debt you have, the worse that is. There's just no way around it. And I don't know how anything is ever going to be done about that. And this is another thing, you just have to look at it and say, well, at least I'm living in interesting times. And, if you find a way to do something about it, then you should, because if no one tries to do anything about our problems or anything that's going wrong, then certainly nothing's going to get better. But again, you have to weigh everything that you do and where you spend your time and energy. You have to weigh it in terms of what you can actually get out of it, which is, can you actually do anything here? Can you do it, be effective at all? Or are you just wasting your time? I know for me personally, the past few years, I've spent a ridiculous amount of time following politics. I followed the 2024 election very, very closely. And this is mostly because I'm bored and don't really have a social life. The thing about politics is that it's constantly being updated. So every day you can check in and occupy yourself with the ongoings. But I can tell you for a fact, had I not spent any time paying attention to politics and analyzing who might win and who's saying what and the drama of it all, I'd probably be in a much better situation personally right now as an individual, because I wasn't enriched whatsoever for following the politics. It was really just a form of entertainment for me, and it was very entertaining. It was a great way to kill time if you're looking to kill time, but I don't think people should be looking to kill time. I regret killing time in this way. I wish I was more productive. I could have actually been doing things that benefit me and my community or my career or my health. There's an endless list of ways you can be more productive than paying attention to politics, especially today. Politics is ultimately meaningless in terms of the individual if you think about it. I mean, what does voting even mean? You went to a voting center and you ticked a box. This doesn't say anything about who you are. It doesn't say anything about your character. It actually, for the most part, for a lot of people, all it really demonstrates is where you're from, how you were raised, and who you know, because that's how people typically vote. And it doesn't say anything about your character. It doesn't say anything about who you are as a person. And frankly, I don't think it should have any bearing on whether or not people can be friends and have relationships with each other. And it seems like today it's more prevalent than ever that people avoid each other just because of how they vote. And this is asinine. This is so childish. It does not say anything about a person based on what box they tick at the voting office. It says nothing about them whatsoever. It says nothing about them at all. But because so many people are hypnotized and just plugged into these screens and these endless media cycles, which are designed to capture your attention and to insert itself into your brain in an emotional way, it charges you up, and it does not have any good psychological effects, because it makes you view other people as a problem when really they're not. They're just doing the best they can like you are, and how they vote says nothing about who they are, and you don't even know why they vote how they vote, so you shouldn't care about how people vote. And so I try not to. I'm at a point where I'm just trying to avoid politics altogether when I'm interacting with other people. And I know a lot of people are that way, but I've thought about, meeting new people or going to clubs and social groups and stuff like that and introducing myself. And as a joke saying, so do you want to talk about politics? Just totally as a joke. But I've thought even just bringing politics up, that might kind of sour the mood, or people might not find it funny, or people might actually get riled up or in their emotions or whatever. It's just better to avoid the subject altogether at this point, which I think is ridiculous, but at once it is where we are. As 2016 was my first election, I think we should do a retrospective on what the options have been since 2016. In 2016, the candidates were Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, both pretty bad. 2020, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, both bad. In 2024, Donald Trump for a third time, and Kamala Harris. Probably the worst two options yet, remarkably, because, I don't think I really need to give any commentary on Kamala Harris, right? She just was not there. She was not in it. she was like the most empty suit I have ever seen, the least convincing presidential candidate possibly in history. She just seemed like she was struggling to get through a script in every interview, every time she was on camera. It looked like all she was trying to do was play a role, and she wasn't very good at it. And I say that because obviously all Donald Trump was doing is playing a role, but he's at least good at it. He at least seems sincere. He at least seems convincing. Kamala Harris, it's like she's struggling to remember her lines, you know what I mean? And Donald Trump, on the other hand, he can just rip it off the cuff, and he's funny. He's very funny. I think he's very funny, even though I don't really like him. I've never voted for him. I don't have anything good to say about him being the president, to be honest. But he's at least a very entertaining, and it comes natural to him. And that's why, in 2015, I remember this so vividly. Donald Trump came out and everyone mocked him. Everyone laughed about it and said he has no chance. And then as time went on, it was just crazy how he ascended to the presidency out of nowhere when people were mocking him. You can find videos of this on YouTube of what they were saying over the course of the election, and then there were people who were against Trump, what they were saying about him before the election, and then once he won, and it's very amusing. I think you should be able to find that amusing regardless of if you like Donald Trump or not. But Kamala Harris, on the other hand, this woman is like, it's like, how did she even get to any sort of position of influence in the first place? I'm not saying she's undeserving of anything she's ever achieved. I'm just saying for the period of time that I was paying attention to her and that the entire country was paying attention to her, frankly, I didn't see anything. There was no charisma. There was no sincerity. It was really the most pathetic. I don't know how it could have been more pathetic. Even with Joe Biden in his dementia-ridden state, when he had absolutely no business running, and if they ran him, he would have been the worst candidate in history. He at least had the spirit. He at least had a spirit like he wanted to be president. Kamala Harris didn't even have that. She just showed up and went through the motions, whatever she thought they were. It was like she didn't even want the job. It was literally like she didn't even want to be president. But she found herself in this position. She was selected as the vice president for Joe Biden because she's a woman of color, let's just be honest. And then Joe Biden couldn't run again, even though he wanted to, which is hilarious. And so who are they going to run? They're going to run the vice president. I'm pretty sure they didn't even vote to choose her. I'm pretty sure, the Democrats, that is. They just ran her, and it was abysmal. It was crazy how bad she was. And I'm not talking about policy this, policy that. I'm just talking about the candidates, the strength of their candidacy. If they, seemed presidential at all, neither of them seemed presidential at all. And this is what I was saying earlier about 2016. It really did kick the 2024 election in the ass in terms of dignity and seriousness. You go back and you look at Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton from these times, they were so much more presidential. They were so much more articulate and serious about it. And in 2024, it really was pathetic. It has me concerned for the trajectory of our country. I do think 2028 is going to get a lot better. I definitely think after 2024, there's going to be a return to this role being taken more seriously. I think Trump is really a wild card that shook up all of politics for the entire time that he was involved in it. And I think we can all know pretty safely 2028 is the end of the line for him in his political career. We will see, though. It might not be that way. It almost certainly will be that. I'd bet money that it is that way. But then you can look at who are they considering to be the candidates for 2028. It's people like the two front runners at the moment are J.D. Vance and Gavin Newsom. Both of these guys, I don't even know what to say about them. Which one is more presidential? Probably JD Vance. And I don't like JD Vance and I don't like Gavin Newsom. I'm just trying to look at this objectively here. When I see Gavin Newsom, I see in him a sort of Kamala Harris. He's not as bad as Kamala Harris, but he is still in that same sort of, he still seems like he's just trying to appear presidential when he's not actually convinced of it himself. Like he's unsure of how to go about convincing the people he's interacting with. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but he tries really hard to make it look like he knows what he's doing. He doesn't really believe in becoming the president. He seems more concerned with doing what's necessary to become president, if that makes sense. And don't get me wrong, JD Vance is the exact same way in this regard, in my opinion. But I think JD Vance, he seems so much more convincing and sincere, even though, again, this is not an endorsement. This is not me telling you who I like more. This is just looking at the candidates on the horizon, because we just got done looking at the previous candidates, who were all really, 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 really bad. I will say this. I would probably want JD Vance over Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, or Kamala Harris. I don't know about Gavin Newsom. He just does not seem presidential to me. And this is the thing about the Democrats, in my opinion. They just don't have anyone. They don't have anyone who can get the job done. They don't have anyone that's really presidential. I think the Republicans have far more, at least, options that seem and appear presidential. And I'm not a Republican. I don't like the Republican Party. But Marco Rubio, JD Vance, and even Ted Cruz, all of these figures are vastly more presidential than anyone I can think of on the Democrat side, which the main three that come to mind are Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, and that's kind of about it. So the thing about American politics is ultimately that it just sucks. And it didn't used to suck, okay? The people involved used to be at least marginally respectable, or at least they appeared respectable, and there was more dignity to all of it. These days, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like I don't even feel like I can't even bring myself to waste time on politics because it's just all so ridiculous and dumb. I mean, I don't know how anyone can look at any of the candidates since 2016 and think that they are qualified or that you should vote for them. Once again, I have never voted for them. And regardless of how good the candidates are, the Republicans and the Democrats, regardless of the quality of the candidates, the system sucks no matter what. If you are a citizen, if you're not in it, if you don't directly benefit from this nonsense system, the two-party system, I don't know how you bring yourself to not want to tear it down. It is unthinkable to me how anyone can think that the two-party system is what you should want as a normal everyday citizen. I mean, there are lobbyist groups who fund literally both candidates. They fund both parties. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous that there's only two political parties that have a shot at doing anything in this country. How do more people not see how absurd that is? It's just ridiculous on its face. It is ridiculous on its face that we'd be given two options, as if there's only two options worth considering. That is so ridiculous. And I don't know if this will happen, but I truly would, in my lifetime, like to see this two-party system go away. I don't know if that's possible. I really don't know how change is going to look in the future. Obviously, nothing lasts forever. The two-party system won't last forever. The United States of America will not last forever. But if the two-party system goes away, which it obviously should for the benefit, the welfare of the citizens, I don't know how that would come about. But I'll tell you this, I'll be doing everything in my power to make it come about. Anything, any movement that I see to hasten the change, the shift from just two parties every single time, just these same two parties that suck and have sucked for the better part, more than 20 years probably at this point. Anything I can do to accelerate us getting away from that alone, that should be our next step. Maybe not full on revolution, but we need to make it so we're not just looking at these two political parties. I don't even know how we got to this point. Honestly, I should probably look into that because it is a disgrace. It's a disgrace that there'd only be two options. It's an utter disgrace. In other countries or democracies, or at least I'm pretty sure they are, they don't have just two parties. The countries in Europe don't just have two parties. Why the hell do we just have two? How did that happen? How does that make any sense? I think there used to be more. I'm pretty sure there used to be more. I'm not positive on that. I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to American politics, to be honest with you. But it's repulsive. I'm disgusted on a visceral level. This is the thing. You never talk about politics with people for obvious reasons. I discussed that earlier in this episode. But now that I'm actually just talking about what I actually think, like I am truly fed up on a very deep level about the state of American politics and how we are just helpless to do anything about it when it's so obviously messed up. There should not just be two parties that put up the candidates every single time. That is unbelievable. It is unbelievable that it is that way. Because guess what? What happens when the two parties both agree to betray the citizens? Well, then the citizens don't have a way out of that betrayal because they don't have anyone that they can vote for. But that's another thing about the two-party system is you can vote for third parties. It's just that no one does. So then that's a legitimate question in and of itself. Why don't people vote for third parties? I did. And it wasn't because I believed in the party that I was voting for necessarily. I just want to popularize the idea of voting outside of the two parties that everyone acts like they are, they don't have a choice to vote for. They don't have a choice outside of those choices. And we can put choices in quotations here because they're not, there's really nothing merit-based about it. It's just total nonsense. America is not run by the people. That is total nonsense. We don't vote for who we get. We vote for options that are chosen for us, right? And that's also why you have to look at it from a distance and be detached from it and take it for what it's worth, which is the comedic angle and the entertainment angle. Because me sitting here thinking about how messed up it all is, it's not going to change anything and it doesn't serve me. You should only concern yourself with things if you can do something about it. Politics is one of those things you almost certainly can't do anything about it. But you should do what you can still in that capacity. And what exactly that looks like, I'm not entirely sure. I really am not entirely sure. It really seems like there's nothing anyone can do other than vote. Maybe you could volunteer for a campaign, but, actual meaningful change. And, that's something that's interesting at this point in history that we're at. It seems like change becomes harder each and every single day. Like the ability for people to stage revolts and rebellions, like, the state has a monopoly on power. And that was always the case on some level. but it's nothing like it is today. Like today, if the military wanted to squash uprisings or rebellions, they couldn't always do that in centuries prior. But today, with modern warfare technology, helicopters, drones, and all the sophisticated equipment the militaries have, it's like the militaries, local militaries, wherever it might be, North Korea or Russia or the United States, wherever, the people don't stand a chance against a hyper technologically advanced military. The military has a monopoly on force, and the people truly are at their mercy. And that is not, it hasn't always been to this extent that has been the case. You know what I mean? Like today, you could never have the American Revolution today or the French Revolution today because the militaries have remote controlled drones and missiles and helicopters and stuff. Back in the day, you could form a legitimate force against whatever government or military, and that's what happened. And that's just not possible now. So we are in a much more interesting place, humanity collectively, than we were at any point in human history before now. And that revolution is basically impossible. It's basically literally impossible. So long as, yeah, it's basically impossible. And that also, there's another angle with how technologically advanced militaries have become and the ineptitude and incompetency of our leaders. You know, I was thinking about this the other day. George Bush responded to 9/11. You know, it's very, very famous. The image of, I think, his Secretary of State whispering in his ear, a second plane has hit the second tower. Just imagine if truly either Trump or Biden were handling it, but Biden much more so than Trump. I mean, he couldn't have handled it. You know, at least Trump is like kind of cogent and Trump can walk around and stuff. Biden was struggling to move. He was struggling to hear. He couldn't speak very well. It's like, if this person is actually responsible for like anything, then we are in a terrible situation. But they also have authority over the most powerful military in the world, which kind of go hand in hand, I guess, if anything happens and having, you know, the most powerful military. And it's very unfortunate. And, you know, I'm not sitting here defending Bush. I don't have very strong opinions either way. I haven't looked into it. I don't remember it. But, you know, there's all these people think, you know, they lied about weapons of mass destruction. And we fought like multi-trillion-dollar war in the Middle East, etc. I'm not making a comment on that. I'm just making a comment that I would rather have Bush I'd way rather have Bush than Trump or Biden making these decisions. And that is a very bad thing, you know. The power that these two people had and one currently has, they should not have it. They absolutely should not have it. It's just that simple. And there's something humorous about that, which is just how powerful they are. You know, it's not like you have a bad supervisor at Lowe's or you have a bad manager at the restaurant you work at. It's like the firepower, the force at their disposal that they have to use is so immense and they are so incompetent. It's like out of a movie. And I've months ago I saw these comments way more than I do now. There's a lot of people online talking about how we are actually living in the movie Idiocracy. And I can't say I disagree with them too much because we are going to have a UFC fight on the White House lawn for the 250th birthday of America, I'm pretty sure. Isn't that happening? 4th of July, 2026. Um, we're going to have a UFC fight on the White House lawn. That's Idiocracy tier stuff, dude. Just so you know, if you haven't seen the movie, that's Idiocracy. That's like beyond Idiocracy. A UFC fight on the White House lawn. That is hilarious. And, Biden not being able to talk. The fact that they even sent him out on that debate stage. If you haven't seen the presidential debate from 2024 between Trump and Biden, just look at Joe Biden's performance in that. He was literally he couldn't get thoughts out, and his people even sent him out there. But also, I say his people even sent him out there. I'm pretty sure I remember like reporting and stuff at the time that everyone wanted him to step down, but he was refusing to. And I guess he can do that. And then they might have threatened him with something like, we're going to force you out. They might have had a way to force him out. And then he finally said he's stepping down. But, it's like you got a leader who's supposed to make all the most important decisions. He can hardly talk. He doesn't want to quit, even though literally everyone else wants him to quit, and he should quit. And they had to threaten him to get him out. And he can't even talk. He's fallen down everywhere. It's like it really does drive home the point that nobody cares. Truly, nobody cares. In a country where people care, where they haven't given up, where they haven't surrendered themselves to nihilism, we would never have allowed someone like Joe Biden, who was clearly far and away not mentally there, to lead the country and to have all that power. And then once it was obvious and undeniable as the years went on, we wouldn't have just said, what are you going to do? Who cares? You should care. We should care. But us as single individuals, we can't do anything about it, but we should collectively care enough that something is done about it. And I feel like not too long ago in this country, that was the case. People did care more about the leadership. But now it's not that way. For whatever reason. I have no idea. I have no idea how we got to this point. I have no idea why people care as little as they do. But it is not a good thing. And it is certainly bad for all of us. And probably things will only continue to get worse with time. So like, you think things are bad now, the consequences are cascading and compounding. Okay? It's like the fact that things are going wrong today means they're probably going to go even more wrong tomorrow. And then the more wrong they go over time, the more wrong they will go overall. And it's kind of like a spiral. It's kind of like a death spiral. It really does feel like the United States is in a death spiral right now. But hey, maybe something good will happen or materialize in 2026, 2028. We can only hope. I don't know how possible that is. Earlier I was talking about how J.D. Vance is probably the most presidential candidate of the last 10 or more years. I don't like him, though. I'm not going to get into why I don't like him. I think he's a fake person. We can kind of leave it at that. And I'm definitely not going to be voting for him. So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But things only seem to be getting worse. I have no idea what would reverse that trend. It might even be too late. 40 trillion in debt. It seems irreversible. It seems like a sinking ship and there's nothing that can be done about it. And that is extremely tragic. But it's also the reason why You just have to appreciate it for what it's worth, because it's not your fault the ship is sinking. There's nothing you can do about the ship sinking. You just have to enjoy. You have to appreciate the fact that you're on a sinking ship. You get to witness it firsthand. You know, there are those people who tried to go to the bottom of the ocean to see the Titanic. Well, guess what? There were people who were actually on it when it sank. So think about that. You are getting a very unique experience. It's not necessarily good, but you can appreciate it for what it's worth. The 2024 presidential debate number 2 between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. This was also something, this is, in my opinion, even though we should all be kind of upset, kind of worried that a presidential debate is going like that, this is much easier for me, in my opinion, to have a laugh at, because it really was hilarious. It sucked and it was hilarious. And I don't think either of the candidates at any point during the debate demonstrated that they should be the president. I think, honestly, if you are serious about the 2024 presidential debate, all they did was demonstrate that they are not qualified, they're not fit, and that, frankly, neither of them even really seemed to care to win. It was just kind of the positions that they found themselves in at that point in their lives, but neither of them really believed in their mission. Once again, like I said earlier, Joe Biden really wanted to be the president. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, they didn't even seem like they wanted the job, which blows my mind. I mean, it's one thing to be incompetent. It's one thing to be not qualified. It's another thing to be incompetent and unqualified and also not want the job and also be trying to get the job and also be a front runner for the job. How have we gotten to this point? It's lunacy. It's lunacy. And it's because all these people behind the scenes, the donors, the people with the money, the people that are actually pulling the strings, all they want is an empty suit that will do what they want. It has nothing to do with what's best for the people or the voters or a president that's intelligent and discerning and perceptive and has good judgment. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do, how do we get somebody in that can win the election and give us what we want? That is what politics has become in America. And it's also why we are not a democracy. We are not even close to a democracy. Anyone that tells you we're a democracy is wrong. And I'm not a socialist or anything like that, but it's just kind of a fact that you cannot mix capitalism and democracy, because the people with the more money have more power and a much bigger say than people without money. And just because everyone can vote, certainly in the age of TV and ads and stuff like that, our votes are not all the same. People vote with their money. They vote with their influence. And democracy, it just doesn't exist. Democracy is not real. And even if we weren't in a capitalist society where the wealth inequality is greater than it has literally ever been anywhere on the planet, even in that case, we're still only choosing between options that are picked for us to begin with because of the two-party system. And I would not be surprised if all of this, it's all intertwined, obviously, like money, the fact that there are only two parties, capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is that we don't have a choice. Our votes really don't mean anything. I saw the other day, someone online said that the only difference between Democrats and Republicans is how the media covers what they do. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I also think that the media is like a microscope on a grain of sand, and they just magnify whatever minute differences there are between the two parties. I think regardless of who's in office, the trajectory of the country is probably just about exactly the same.